So with everything that's going on, I've come to the conclusion that I have not been getting enough sleep lately, so I am making an effort to be less woke. Wow, you're really gonna open with that, are you? Okay then, let's talk about the complaints of wokeness in entertainment. This won't be controversial at all, especially with most of my subscribers being Doctor Who fans, because this definitely hasn't been any kind of sticking point in that fandom. You know, it occurs to me actually that between this and the positive masculinity video that I did last month, I've kind of been branching out from the usual LGBTQ plus specific videos so far this year. That hasn't really been intentional, but I guess it's just where my mind has been going lately. Topics that are in the same zip code, but not exactly the same neighborhood. Don't worry, we'll get back to our usual queer gathering soon enough. Shh. Don't tell the straights. So the reason that this has come up for me is because it's one of those times where I have just gotten sick of seeing the same hollow, infuriating comment masquerading as an argument over and over and over again. So I am hoping that by addressing this nonsense in video form will mean that I'll get it out of my system and won't have to keep thinking about it. It has yet to actually pan out that way for these things, but hope springs eternal, and I can be a right stubborn bastard. So, I'm about to throw you out some examples of what I've been dealing with, and they are largely going to be referencing Doctor Who because that's what I talk about the most. But if you browse the comments of my videos, or indeed the comments on nearly anything discussing film, television topics, video games, etc., then you've probably seen a few gems along the lines of...
What a load of rubbish! Tennant dies for Wilf, an old man, and this Dr. Woke ran away? This totally goes against all canon. It's called Doctor Who! Can't even call it that anymore. This is BBC agenda at its peak. This will lose so many more fans.
Your logic is flawed because Chibs & Co. do not have to explain a damn thing we would like them to. We the fans have much more imagination and creativity in our collective little finger than Chibs & Co. have, plain and simple. Chibs & Co. are too busy pushing an agenda to imagine a believable explanation.
What is to be gained with the gender swap? The same argument you did here can be there. Plus, it is agenda, and not story-driven.
I've been a fan of the show for ages, seen every episode including the classics and the audio episodes. Even built myself a full-size TARDIS and K9. The show is now. I can't watch it anymore. It's so painful. The show used to be sci-fi, not a woke soap opera. Absolute garbage.
Doctor Who ain't good sci-fi story anymore. It's there to shoehorn the BBC's PC left-wing agenda. It's beyond woke now.
For someone writing for the so-called woke SJW community, Chibnall makes the Doctor look totally redundant. I actually prefer Hellbent.
Chib has said he cares not for canon, and will have our noses rubbed in woke.
I couldn't agree less. If it was cancelled, there would be one fewer pieces of woke, lefty propagandized crud available to brainwash our kids and secure a more insecure, divisive, and dangerous future for us all.
Rest in peace, Doctor Who. You gave us decades of fantastic stories and adventures.
Doctor Who has become a pile of
joy,
bullshit.
but you are now a shadow
characters
of
leaving will
the
change that. That's the only way to change it.
Bit of a pattern, I'm sure you noticed. It's bad because it's SJW pander, or left-wing agenda, or woke. Now, all of these terms are euphemisms for racial, gender, or sexual diversity, as well as any core message that is currently classified as being even slightly politically left of center. So pretty much anytime anything acknowledges the existence of somebody who isn't white, heterosexual, cisgender, able-bodied, or is a woman filling a traditionally male function, tends to get mockingly stamped by detractors as woke. And look, the labeling is what it is. There are people who, for reasons that escape me personally, find these things inherently offensive, and there isn't much that I or anybody can do about that fact. You can't make people change what bothers them like that, and I'm not gonna try. No, so what it is that I'm fed up with is how woke or progressive or agenda-driven or politically correct or whatever, of course the by now vintage chestnut of SJW pandering, I hate that those terms get thrown out as thought-terminating cliches. Those are phrases that get said in order to shut down the conversation and rely entirely on the idea that these things are inherently bad and that anything that can be associated with them is also bad, and therefore, once the label is applied, no more discussion is required. It's an anti-intellectual argument because it actively discourages the conversation, and it's also a coward's tactic. The point of any thought-terminating cliche is to have the appearance of winning an argument without actually making any kind of substantive case for your perspective. It has the appearance of winning because those who disagree tend to take hearing these terms as signals that the discussion has hit a wall and there is little point in progressing. So they, I would think, wisely disengage, and then the anti-PC brigade declares victory by default because, well, if the other side left, it must be because you won, right? I had an interesting bit of validation in relation to all this, actually earlier this year, when I went to the Doctor Who convention Gallifrey 1 before everything went to hell. Because I got into probably about a half a dozen conversations with people who were clearly unhappy with what they felt was a trend of wokeness in Doctor Who in recent years. And I say that those conversations were validating for me because they were perfectly reasonable, calm, polite conversation, absent of these thought-terminating cliches, and it confirmed my long-held suspicion that in comment sections and Twitter and similar cesspits, people will dig in and argue dirty, but when talked to in person, they drop the performative stonewalling and are capable of not only absorbing nuance, but providing it as well. Now, I don't have the time to actually sit down for one-on-one conversations with all of these people, so let's get into why the whole woke automatically equals bad notion is just a flat-out garbage argument.
It's not what a movie is about, it's how it is about it.
Let's be very clear. There is such a thing as bad pieces of entertainment. Bad movies, bad comics, bad TV shows, bad video games, the works. And there is plenty of bad entertainment that fits the mocking label of woke. But it's not bad because it's woke. It's bad because it's bad. The recent Doctor Who episode, Orphan 55, is a bad piece of television with a core environmentalist message to it. But the reason it's bad is because it shifts awkwardly between story acts, suffers from directionless performances from the supporting cast, it gives us creatures that only look good in the dark and then puts them in broad daylight, it places its reveal at a very strange point in the structure of the story, and then waits until the last 2 minutes to try and slam home its message with the subtlety of a carbine drill to the taint. It's not bad because of what its message is, or the mere existence of a progressive message in the first place, but because of how badly it's executed on the standard nuts and bolts that all visual storytelling is judged on. How do I know that? Because it's got the exact same twist as the original Planet of the Apes, and it's making nearly the same point. And Planet of the Apes is a classic that holds up to this day because it nails everything that Orphan 55 botches. Great acting, tightly paced script, effects carefully shot to hide their limitations, and a hero with a personal character arc so the revelation can hit him directly in a way that is completely consistent with what we know about the man, and it never feels like he's stopping to talk directly to the screen, despite the fact that it ends with him literally yelling, "Damn you all to hell," at humanity of the 20th century, aka the audience watching. It's good because it nails the execution. Also, a tangent, bringing up a movie from the 1960s lets me at least touch on the fact that people who deploy the woke, therefore bad argument also tend to imply, if not outright state, that its message and attitudes and this whole progressive thing is somehow new, or at least the insertion of them into fiction is something new and recent. And that's also nonsense. I've talked about that specifically in regards to Doctor Who before, but in fiction in general and science fiction specifically, which right now a very high percentage of mainstream entertainment is some form of, has always been dominated by progressive messaging. You do get the occasional conservative voice from figures like Robert Heinlein, but they are clearly the minority in the genre and always have been. The inherent nature of science fiction is built to comment on the present by speculating about the future, or at least future-style tech. That is what the genre is for. As I said, I talked about this in regards to Doctor Who over 2 years ago, so check out that video if you want to, and you want more details on that. Okay, tangent over, coming back on topic. That quote from Roger Ebert may be one of the most important things to keep in mind if you ever want to make meaningful criticism. Agreeing or disagreeing with messaging is a matter of opinion. But regardless, there is still a level of craft and polish that results in a good final product. And to show that this is not just the anti-PC brigade needing to separate ideology from quality, and instead this whole thing goes both ways, I'm going to talk about a couple films with messaging that is distinctly not progressive. What I'm about to say is not exactly a widely held belief over here among us SJWs, but I think the movie 300 is straight up a great film. I don't agree with most of its core messages, and when you put it into the context of things that Frank Miller, who was the writer of the original comic that it's based incredibly faithfully on, things that he has said since then and also written, I do honestly wish I could say that it's a bad movie. I would feel better if I could say that, but I can't because it's not. It's precisely presented with perfectly pitched performances, exquisite eye candy, expertly evoking emotions through carefully constructed courage confronting crowds of colossal chaos. I should apologize for that alliterative mess, but I won't. I'm proud of that. My point is, though, people can very reasonably find that film uncomfortable, offensive, even detestable. Nobody is obligated to like it, and I wouldn't argue that anyone who didn't like it should. I would, however, push back on claims that its politics make it an actively bad film because they don't. Be honest about what it is you're criticizing. With something like 300, you're not criticizing a badly made film with uncommitted acting or superfluous story threads or incomprehensible action editing. It is a well-made film with a mindset you may not like, and that's fair, but just be honest about that being your issue. Being about that doesn't decide its quality. It's not what it's about. It's how it is about it. Execution is what determines quality. After that, it's a matter of taste. Now, of course, some will, and probably have already, argued in the comments that the wokeness is what leads to the bad execution. Now, this is a mildly more sophisticated argument, but not by much. A hypothetical example goes something like this. That actor of color in that part didn't give a good performance, and the reason they got the part over a better qualified white actor is because of PC agenda wokeness. So people are basically arguing when they deploy this against what they perceive to be a form of entertainment affirmative action, which is a bit of a bizarre argument, as though there's never been a miscast white actor before, or as though every other POC actor who might have been cast would have delivered the exact bad performance. One bad performance from a quote-unquote diversity hire gets manipulated into an argument to never diversify the cast or crew again, although, strangely, a bad performance from a cis-het white male actor never gets painted as, see, this is why we shouldn't be hiring white actors. I say strangely, but it's not that strange because white, straight, cisgender, and usually male is the template. It's the default that all characters are presumed to be unless necessitated by the story or otherwise indicated. I've brought it up before that the less presentation there is of any given group, the more intense the scrutiny of the few bits of representation that do exist. And with far fewer examples, especially within certain genres or franchises, one or two diverse characters are suddenly carrying the weight of not only their demographic, but of every diverse demographic. Everything that isn't cisgender, heterosexual, white, and traditionally masculine all gets lumped together under other. And suddenly a bad performance from a person of color becomes a reason not to cast a transgender actor. See what happens when you deviate from the template? Now, to be clear, there are times that creators or corporations actually do quite a bit to contribute to the perceptions that fuel these arguments, and just before I sat down to record this, Marvel Comics gave a pretty much perfect example of that. Earlier this month, they announced the launch of a new iteration of the superhero team, the New Warriors, with an all-new cast of characters. And this lineup is excruciatingly painful for a number of reasons, all stemming from how blindingly obvious it is that the company and the writer, by the name of Daniel Kibblesmith, are desperately trying to appear hip to the youth. Now, to be fair, the book isn't out yet, but the concepts alone have already drawn serious backlash from the intended audience, especially around the characters of the twins, who are named Safe Space and Snowflake. Yes, you did hear me right, Safe Space and Snowflake is not binary, because of course they are. Let's be clear, this is pandering, and it is bad because of how hard it is pandering, but it is not bad because of who it's pandering to. If these twins were instead named Edgelord and Rational Skeptic in an effort to appeal to the opposite side of the presumed culture war, they would still be painful characters conceptually. People will call things pandering to SJWs, and as we clearly see, that's sometimes even accurate, but then they decide to blame the audience that's being pandered to rather than the practice of the pandering itself, because bad pandering is bad pandering even if you're the demographic that is being pandered to. And even beyond this example, I know a ton of you have already started compiling lists of all the bad properties that are woke. Remind yourselves, if you're doing that, of the fundamental principle of data analysis. Correlation is not causation. There is woke entertainment, there is bad entertainment. They do overlap at times, but they are not synonymous. For comparison, and to stick with comics for a little bit longer, because I feel like I don't talk about them enough, from the late 80s through, it was kind of hard to pin down when it actually started easing off, but at least for the entirety of the 90s, the comic book industry had essentially the same problem inverted. Everything was trying to be edgy, dark, and gritty, and a lot of it was bad. But it would be lazy to say that things like Youngblood, Bloodshot, the 90s version of Punisher, and so much more were bad because of being edgy, dark, and gritty. Because there were good comics that were also those things. Heck, the entire trend was kicked off by Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, which are both definitely all three of those things and are also both great. The bad comics of the 90s were bad because they were badly drawn, poorly thought out, and shallow, because they were being made by creators who were more interested in jumping on a bandwagon than doing their own thing and finding their own unique voice. And if that bandwagon, instead of being dark, edgy, and gritty, had been rainbow colors and the power of friendship, they would have jumped on that instead and done it just as badly. Those with a strong artistic vision can shine through even if their work is part of a trend. Watchmen holds up. Sandman holds up. The Max holds up. I'll even go to bat for the first few years of Spawn. Regardless of the trend, the cream rises to the top because it's not the trend that is the problem. It is the chasers who aren't inherently drawn to the material but instead want to cash in or are being told to cash in by the people who sign their checks. They are the problem. So even if you want to call a piece of woke media trend chasing, because honestly, it may well be, that still won't be what makes it good or bad. So look beyond whatever trend you think it's being pandered to find the actual reasons that it doesn't work. Because if it's actually bad, they won't be that hard to find. But if all you've got to fall back on is SJW agenda, lol, then maybe you don't actually have an argument that's worth making. And if you feel like I'm calling you out, please take this to heart. I'm not trying to tell you to shut up. I am challenging you to back up your assertions. Because even if I disagree with your conclusion, if you put in the work, I can at least respect that much. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of work being done. And it's the laziness and the lack of self-reflection when I see these arguments that annoys me more than anything else. And above all, in comments, on Twitter, and in life, please, just don't be an asshole. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you will subscribe, share this video, and of course, feel free to leave a comment. I actually do enjoy getting them. Just, try and formulate an actual argument if you're going to try and disagree with me. I also have a Patreon if you want to help the channel grow into bigger and better things. There's other links in the descriptions beside that for you to check out, but you also don't have to do any of it because at the end of the day, you're the council, I'm just running the meeting, and until next time, this council is adjourned.